Good morning. Today's lesson is EKGs 101, the setup and acquisition. I'm Evan Walker, and contributing today is Tim McKnight. Today's objectives is for each student to understand the definition and basics of an EKG, and then how to perform an EKG with the patient preparation, correct lead wire placements, data entry, and of course the acquisition of an EKG study. Now, before we go any further, we'd like to know what you think an EKG is or does. Write down what you think an EKG is or how it's measured, and let's discuss. Now, the official long version of what an EKG is it's the process of recording the electrical activity of the heart over a period of time using the electrodes placed on the skin. These electrodes detect the tiny electrical changes on the skin that arise from the heart muscle's electrophysiologic pattern of depolarizing and repolarizing during each heartbeat. A conventional 12-lead ECG has 10 electrodes that are placed on the patient's limbs and on the surface of the chest. We'll talk about why there's 10 wires but 12 leads a little later. The overall magnitude of the heart's electrical potential is then measured from 12 different angles, known as leads, and is recorded over a period of time, usually about 10 seconds. In this way, the overall magnitude and direction of the heart's electrical depolarization is captured at each moment through the cardiac cycle. The graph of voltage versus time produced by the non-invasive medical procedure is referred to as an electrocardiogram. Now that I've given a very long and very detailed look at what an EKG is, go ahead and wake up and I'll give you the short version of what an EKG is. Now the short version is that the electrical activity of the heart is recorded from several angles using these conductive stickers you attach to the patient. The electrical activity is used to create pictures that give a detailed look at what's happening with the heart rhythm. Now we'd like to check your learning because I know that that's a bit much. And so we'd like you to turn to your partner and ask them or have them tell you what an EKG is. Now today with us is Tim McKnight. Tim is a career therapist with over 30 years and thousands of EKGs. And so we'd like to hear from him about some of the details behind EKGs so that we can learn a little more and get some of the expert tricks. Here's Tim.
Good evening. My name is Tim McKnight. I'd like to talk to you a little bit this evening about the acquisition and the setup for an EKG. Of course, the purpose of an EKG, probably heard about it, we've talked about it already a little bit, is to essentially take a picture of the electrical activity of the heart each time the heart beats. When your heart beats, it creates an electrical impulse that travels throughout your heart, and each of the areas that it passes through the heart will generate an electrical signal that is transmitted onto paper. The few things about an EKG, of course, it's really is a baseline examination of establishing a baseline. Would look for changes in the future to help to diagnose. It's one of the diagnostic tools for really any kind of cardiac related illness. It can also clue us in on things if a patient is having adverse reactions to his or her medications. It can help clue us in about what's changing in the heart. Few of the important tips about an EKG is you want to have a patient that's ideally cooperative. That's always a bonus. But you want to explain the procedure to your patient. You explain what you're going to do. You explain purpose of the exam, ask them if they have any questions prior to starting, and then kind of explain step by step about how we're going to do it. One important thing is explaining to the patient we're going to have them, have to take off their top and, kind of expose the area in the chest, and over here in the left side of the chest especially. If your patient appears to be in any way uncomfortable, there are kind of steps you can do to alleviate that. Having a towel to place over the chest area. If it's a woman and you're a man, opposite gender, there are times that a patient will feel uncomfortable with that. That's absolutely appropriate. I would ask to have a chaperone in the room, a hospital employee or a clinic employee. One thing is that can help them just kind of feel more kind of comfortable. Plus, it also kind of gives you really another set of eyes. If any family complaint happens or anything like that, you want to have another set of eyes to help you through that. A few of the other important things is you need to have areas on the chest that are relatively dry and really free of hair, which requires shaving if it's a male and has an exceptionally hairy chest. A lot of adult EKGs have kind of some type of process that includes a razor. It is no fun. I had it done once. Anyway, so you would have to shave the area to apply the EKG leads, and explain to your patient what you're going to do there as well. And continuing with EKGs, a few helpful tips to do is in another part of our video we talk about how to actually acquire an EKG. After we're going to place our 10 leads, 4 limb leads, 2 in the arms and 2 on the legs or in the lower abdomen. One thing is prior to running your EKG, you should, on almost all EKG carts these days, you're going to have a live picture of the actual tracing that will print out when you acquire it. Prior to acquiring it, you want to check for things like a stable baseline. You're not getting a lot of motion artifact, or you're not getting a lot of electrical interference. And electrical interference will show up on the tracing as it's almost like a high frequency oscillator tracing. You're getting very unstable baseline. It's going to look really not anything like a heartbeat that you would see on an EKG. It's going to be quite a bit of artifact. One thing you want to do is check for electrical interference that could interfere with the quality of your tracing. You want to check for the placement of the lead itself. Sometimes altering slightly, like the placement of a lead, will eliminate the artifact. And then your patient just kind of moving as well. If you have your lower limb leads, or your leg leads on the abdomen, sometimes just the motion of breathing can interfere with the quality of that tracing. What I would advise is to put those leads on the legs, because when you breathe, your legs don't usually move. So that's to help with kind of the motion artifact. And prior to acquiring the EKG, you just want to always check the quality of your tracing on your screen prior to acquiring. Now,
we'd like to thank Tim for some of his expert tips and advice. And now we'd like to move on to how to specifically do that EKG. Now that we've heard from Tim about some great tips and tricks on how to do an EKG, I'd like to go through how to physically do that EKG. A lot of the information here may be redundant, but we hope by giving you some redundant information that you're able to be successful in performing your EKG. Like Tim may have mentioned, an EKG has 10 wires, but is a 12-lead EKG. That 12-lead EKG is possible with those 10 wires because some of the wires connect their electrical activity through the body. The AVR, AVL, and AVF leads. They help to create that picture across the body. Now, as you'll remember Tim talking about, after you receive the order to do an EKG, you'll want to introduce yourself to the patient, give an explanation of what you're doing, get the consent of the patient to perform the EKG, and oftentimes, like Tim said, you'll need a chaperone to protect you and the hospital from possible litigation. Do not use a family member of the patient. Use a hospital-approved staff, whether that's a nurse or someone else. Now, before you do any procedure, it's important that you wash your hands and sanitize them well. Go ahead and have the patient lie on their back. Remove either the hospital gown or the shirt. Many hospital gowns have snaps along the top that you can remove and fold the gown down. If you're performing an EKG, like Tim said, on a woman, oftentimes you may need to cover that upper chest. You can often have her pull her gown up to just below her breast tissue in order to place those leads successfully. You'll also want to expose the patient's ankles in order to place those lower limb leads. Go ahead and sit the patient up and bring out the EKG machine. Before you can do anything with the leads, you'll want to input some data into the EKG machine. This data will be used to be uploaded to the patient's chart automatically when you print the EKG, and so you want to be exact in your upload of that information. You'll put the patient's name, date of birth, gender, and race. You also have an identifying number called either a social security number or a number that's dictated by the hospital called an MRN number. After you've placed all that information, go ahead and check some of the things down at the bottom. Go ahead and put the EKG machine on the left side of the patient so you don't have to reach over to place the leads. As you're checking down at the bottom of the EKG machine, you'll want it to run at 25 millimeters a second, at 10 millivolts, and 150 hertz. Correct placement of the leads is essential when it comes to interpreting and comparing ECGs. Oftentimes, people get in a hurry and create unnecessary waveforms, and the EKG often has to be done over. And so we encourage you to get it right the first time. One important thing to note is if you can get the lead over the muscle, you'll get the better conductivity than over the bone. You also get less interference over that muscle than the bone. Go ahead and place the leads. You'll place the arm leads down towards the wrists, but if there's an obstruction such as tape or a tag of some kind, you can move those limb leads up and you'll still receive the same signal. You also place those lower limb leads down towards the ankles.